Life, and we are live now.
There we are. Hello, fellow nerds. Welcome to another episode of Between Two Nerds. I'm Jeff Doyle, and with me is my friend and co host, Jeff Tensura. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Jeff. Good morning, Teun. Jeff, really great to see. Unfortunately, we missed last episode due to some miscommunication, so we are back, and it's really great to see everybody. Great to see Teun. And
what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so Teun is going to talk about IRR Explorer and why it is there, what kind of problems it's solving, and problems he has seen deploying BGP security. And Teun has been working for a small ISP in Netherlands when he is pretty much responsible for everything from HR to racking routers to hiring people. So Teun, to you.
Yes,
It's great to have you with us.
thank you. So yes, IRR Explorer.
Is it worthwhile to? I mean, we have a fairly deeply technical audience,
I know.
but is it worthwhile to spend a couple of minutes just talking about what IRR is?
Yeah, maybe it is because well, essentially defines what IRR Explorer is doing. So basically, we have these IP addresses which everyone uses, or IP prefixes, which are assigned by um, the regional routing registries like ARIN or RIPE, depending on the location you are. And they assign you a number of prefixes depending on what you need and what they have available nowadays. And then you get the question, well, so who is using these IP addresses? So to who do they belong? Which autonomous system should be using a specific IP address set? And that's where routing registries come in. It's basically a big database or a series of databases which register which IP addresses are matched with which autonomous systems. And now, like I said, there are many routing registries, not just the regional routing registries have their databases, but there are many more. It's not like two or three, it's like there are 10 or 15 databases.
Yeah.
And nowadays, people use these databases to define what routes they accept from their upstream networks, their downstream networks, peers on an ISP. So they are basically, or were until quite recently, the way people decided, well, which route should I accept and which route shouldn't I accept, because they may be misconfigurations or even an intentional misconfiguration, a BGP hijack. Then the difficult part becomes that there are so many different databases which don't really align. So you have one database that says this AS should be announcing this prefix, and another database says, well, we think this one should be announcing it. So which one should you believe? Yeah, that's a big challenge. And well, luckily people have thought about that and thought that well, RPKI is a good solution for that. Where well, I think you have discussed that quite recently in one of your podcasts, actually. Yeah. So you do basically a form of validation that the registry assigning the IP addresses to you can sign the prefix so that you can validate that a prefix should be announced by a specific AS number, and even if it should be announced in a specific prefix length or a bandwidth of prefix lengths. And that helps a lot because then you can switch from many sources to just a few sources, and you can validate, and you can start building a database on your local network with the routes that you trust and which you accept. And if a route doesn't match the signature, you reject it. So now you have routing databases, you have RPKI, ROAS. And how do you compare those? Because if you want to announce a prefix on the internet, some may use one, some may use the other, some may use a different database, and you still want your prefix, if you start announcing it, to be seen by the entire world. You want full reachability of your network. And so that's where the idea of IRR Explorer started. It was, well, let's start making a tool that can visualize everything we know about all these prefixes. So basically, you start with one very simple form where you just enter a prefix or an AS number or an AS set name, and the tool starts crunching, and you get a nice output which shows you a lot of things that it knows about the prefix or the prefixes announced by that AS. It checks all the popular databases. It checks RPKI. It checks the active routing tables by looking at the NLNOC looking glass, which has over 100 pairs. So we have a pretty decent visibility of what happens on the internet. And by combining that all together, you can, well, point out misconfigurations. And there are many ways that things can be misconfigured, and they can have unwanted effects. They can be minor. You don't have any ROAS, or there's no route object in the database where someone expects it to be. And they can be big, where, for example, you have an incorrect ROA, or someone has registered an entry in some other database for an AS number which isn't yours. And, well, that could have very unwanted consequences. And the whole idea of IRR Explorer is making it easier to, well, get a good view of what's happening with your prefix, and it makes it a lot easier to either start announcing new prefixes or moving prefixes from one network to your own network. That's become a bit of a bigger challenge with RPKI. If you forget to add new ROAS or old ROAS for the previous owner of the prefix, you can get into a lot of trouble when you start announcing it. Well, things like that. So in the back, there's a lot of database crunching going on, basically, and we try to visualize it in a way that it's comprehensible for people to see, well, this is what's happening with a prefix I either have problems with, or I'm considering to start advertising, or am advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to explain the severity of misconfigurations here. If before you would just, cause some inefficient routing, now more and more people are actually dropping invalids in RPKI. So if you configure things wrongly, you might actually completely disappear from the internet.
Yeah,
so it's really, really important. It's becoming more and more important. As pretty much every week there's new company telling, rather than depreference invalids, I'm actually going to drop them.
Yeah.
So the tool is at exactly the right time given the importance.
Yeah, it's good to hear. Yeah, you're right. If you look at most of the tier one transit providers, but nowadays do RPKI rejection of invalids. So that means that, well, the biggest part of the glue between networks just won't accept it anymore.
And I think Twitter, we don't know whether it's hijacked or misconfiguration, last month showed how well RPKI is already working, right? We know that RPKI has its limitations. It only validates origin, and it needs significant number of BGP speakers to be working with it. But the Twitter accident, or not so much accident, showed that RPKI actually does work.
Yes.
The hijack of the route, because it is what it is, right, actually didn't propagate really far because it was dropped by most good citizens of the internet.
Yeah, and that group is growing rapidly, luckily. And because the bigger networks are doing it, it makes it even a bit less important that smaller networks start implementing it. It's not an excuse not to do so, but it's really important that those tier 1s and tier 2 networks do implement it.
So I can proudly let you know that Microsoft has 100% RPKI configured everywhere on the edges. And
Cool.
when we establish peering relationship with our peers, which by today I believe we are like 35K, we encourage them to become members of Manners, to use RPKI, to register their prefixes, and we see really good progress here. So good work, everybody.
Yeah, it's nice to hear. Yeah, and that's of course one part of the whole thing. The other part is that people need to start making ROAS for all their prefixes. And of course, well, that by now is a lot easier because, well, most regional internet registries have made it quite easy to do so. It's basically just filling in a few web forms. And a few years ago, it would be a bit scary to maybe do so because you were unsure what the consequences would be if something would fail. By now, since everyone nearly is doing it, a big failure in RPKI wouldn't make you be the only one standing out, because if you're like the first one doing so, it's only your network that has a problem. The rest of the networks can reach that specific network, and that time is past, luckily.
So a lot of not so nice words have been said about inconsistency of errors, the outdate, I mean, security,
Yes.
what's not. So it looks like your tool could be used by them actually to see whether what they're doing is consistent with what RPKI has, consistent
Yeah.
with. So do you see them using it, reaching out to you? Is there any exchange of information between you?
No, not that I'm aware of. Not with me, at least. So no. It would be nice, though. I agree. They are, of course, free to just use the tool, because you can either just use the website, but it's also a tool you can download and run it for yourself. I wouldn't recommend it because managing our IR Explorer setups isn't that easy. It takes quite a bit of in-depth knowledge about how it works, but you can do it yourself. But you're right that I found a number of prefixes which have really horrible numbers of incorrect routing registry entries. The Ultrarado prefix 2001 ::/32, for example, which used to be an anycasted prefix by lots of networks. There are still like 10 or 15 entries in various databases for that. So there are only 2 networks announcing it right now, I think. So yeah, it could help with cleanup, though you could, in time, I really would hope that building your routing filters would be less dependent on those databases and just be depending on proper RPKI configuration and registration.
Yeah, that's the future state we are striving towards.
Yeah, and it's still a bit further away, but it's getting closer.
So I wonder how popular your tool is. How many people are actually aware of its existence?
I think not enough yet, and that's one of the reasons I'm very glad that we could join this talk, because well, we think it's a very cool tool, and it's very useful for spotting misconfigurations, outdated information, stuff like that. And yeah, I think it deserves a bit more attention.
Okay, so speaking as a Manners steering group member, I'll make sure that your tool is actually mentioned by Manners that could be used to do some pre-validation before you go ahead.
That sounds good. Yeah, great.
So in terms of data crunching, do you see any improvements in terms of where you retrieve data? I know and Apnic has put a lot of work into improving their APIs and reliability. What do you see on your side?
Well, we don't have any really good data on that, I think. We just basically download lots of databases from the registries and just start filling that in our database. And so we don't have any statistics on the what the data actually is at this point. It could be interesting to see if we could do that. I know that there are a number of people already doing stuff like that, and you're probably even better aware of them than I am. We don't really look at the data that way. We're mostly just focused on how to transform it into a format where we can use it to help people along. And that's basically really what the tool is about. And it's not like we try to say it's right or wrong. It's more like a suggestion. Hey, look, you should consider doing this. And of course, sometimes there's an error. You're advertising a /24. The ROAS says it should be a /23. This is bad because this harms your reachability of the prefix. But there are also a number of cases where we just give an advice, like the IP prefix is assigned by Aaron. You registered it in LDB or in RADB or something like that. It's not bad. Maybe it's a bit weird, but there can be very good reasons that you did so. But yeah, I don't have any statistics for you on that. No, sorry.
Okay. So I think it would be really great to see more present in NOCs. So NANOC is happening next week. There's some, so an LNOC is happening soon, and there are other NOC meetings, and they're all people who would really be profiting from using your tool.
Yeah. I totally agree with that.
If I can help in any way to kind of propagate, so obviously you can send an email to NANOC and false loop. There's this tool, and please do.
Yeah. Maybe we should. We haven't done so far, and that's I think we're working on a number of things. Also, some articles on just by showing some examples of, well, if you see this, it means that the reason for it is, well, this mismatches with that. So people can understand a bit better what the exact output means, because it's, well, it can be quite complex material. It's not like well, it's good, yes or no, or good or bad. There's a lot of, well, it may be the case that this is not what you want it to be. And then also there's the time factor. It's what is okay now could be bad in a few weeks because something changed in a routing registry or the actual routing data we see.
So post-show, we will work with you to get all the right links to post them on our channel, so LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, so people can read the articles, educate themselves, because it's important for everybody.
Good.
I've got a question to you. The tool is open source. You are not making any money on it.
No.
What led to development of such tool, and how did you justify to your stakeholders?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the first version was written, if I'm correct, by Job Snijders, who you probably do know, has been a chair for an LNOC for a long time. And well, it showed the potential. There were a few challenges, especially in performance-wise. And we managed to get a grant from a local domain registry, SIDN for the .nl, and they basically sponsored development of this project. Of course, you're building a project is step one, and then you have to maintain it. And well, luckily, NLNOC isn't a really poor organization. We have a lot of very nice sponsors. We give us a lot of money, and we do see the importance of this tool because we think it really improves the routing quality. So we are able to put some funding from our own money into that. And we're talking with a lot of potential sponsors to see if they are willing to well, basically donate so that we can finance the maintenance and maybe building new features because, well, once people start using it, they come up with, well, I really like this, but could you make it a bit different? Because I would like it to have it, well, I don't know. We've seen a couple of nice suggestions on how to improve the output of the information, and some are easy to do, and we can do with either the developers or the volunteers who help. But some are complex because it's not a really easy bit of code which you can just open up and see. Well, let's try to see how I can fix this. There's a lot of stuff happening under the hood, and but that's what makes it powerful, but also what makes it a bit more complex.
Yeah, I mean, great functionality usually requires great complexity. The question how you do deal with it, where it goes. And we had hours of discussions with Ross White on this part of the world. So Netherlands is well known for its open source traditions. There's a number of other open source projects such as Rotinator that is working not same area, but
closely related,
close area. Do you interact with Alex and other people on
the side? Yeah, of course we know them and we see them every now and then on events and stuff like that. And I don't know if there's been any actual talks about specifically this tool. Not that I'm aware of. I haven't been in this project from the start, so it could be that there been before that I joined, but as far as I can tell, no.
So it feels like using your tools to look at your prefixes before you actually deploy RPKI would be almost mandatory step to deploy it, right?
Yeah, actually, it's when I at my day job, when a customer comes to me and says, "Oh, I have this prefix, can you start announcing it for me?" The first thing I do is open it in IR Explorer to see just, well, what is happening at this moment? Is it being advertised by who? Is there an our ROAS available, and should they be added so that I can actually announce it? And once I am advertising it, I check again to see if all the boxes are green actually. So and for that, it's really a great tool, and it's really an easy start in that way, and that's what we aimed at.
So that's really great, and I think we will continue talking about BGP security. So we'll always try to remember that you're around and people can and should use you. And so there's a number of interesting developments in IETF. We've got new RFC recently that allow us to define role of a BGP speaker while establishing BGP session. So you actually advertise your role in open when you establish BGP session. So it uses well-known model that had been published 20 years ago by Jennifer Redford, I believe, and it identifies who you are, whether you're a transit, whether you're a customer, and based on the relationship, actually, you can derive what is it you're allowed to do and what should be accepted from you. Cool. So it's another way of automating filtering based on your role rather than looking into some static definitions. So this is something we are definitely going to cover later on our show. So some of our show friends are co-authors such as Kiyur Patel and who else? I mean, probably just him. But so there's really good developments in BGP security, and thank you for your work. Your work is making the deployment and preparation for that much easier, and people absolutely should know who you are, where to find you, and that there are action points on myself and Jeff to make sure that this information is available on our channels. I'll also take it to Manners to make sure that people know who you are.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, thank you so much for your time and being with us. And again, we will exchange some emails asking you for more information, URLs, and stuff we can publish about you.
Great. Yeah. Thanks very much, Teun. I appreciate you joining us and taking the time to educate us about this.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
And Thank you to all of you that have joined us, and please remember to like us on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. And we will see you again in 2 weeks.